This year began like any other. But it soon transformed into a year we'll never forget. The pandemic, mass protests, and a presidential election would shape 2020. As we move into 2021, are we heading for more unrest or a brighter future?
"2020 will go down in history as an astonishing year. We've never seen this number of hurricanes or this much acreage destroyed by fire. So even if there was nothing political and no pandemic, it would be a remarkable year."
Professor Goldstone models national stability based on a variety of indicators, including inequality, the concentration of wealth, and political polarization. He suggests that America's turbulent times may continue into 2021 based on these indicators.
Take median income as a percentage of GDP per capita. Now that's been going down for decades. So even though the country's been getting richer, the median household has not kept up with the growing wealth of the country. So that's one big warning. Second, the degree of political polarization as seen by the ability of Democrats and Republicans to work together, well, everybody knows that that's disappeared. We're still a deeply divided country. Very different views of reality and different views of the direction the country should take. The purpose of building models of instability like the one I've built is not to give a precise prediction. It's more like a weather vane. It tells you in what direction the wind is blowing. It doesn't tell you what magnitude of storm is going to come.
For a country facing an uncertain future, 2020 proved uniquely difficult, with a divisive presidential election, a global pandemic, and widespread racial protests this year.
This was an unprecedented health emergency. Infectious disease specialists have said that nothing like this has been seen in our lifetimes, in a century. Those type of descriptives, I think, really drive the point home that this was completely uncharted territory.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
When President Trump declared a national emergency and we soon thereafter went on, basically lockdown, shutdown, stay-at-home orders, I don't think there are very many people in this country who are alive today that have ever experienced anything like that before.
Yesterday, I had to FaceTime a family member so they could say goodbye to their mom, their aunt, their grandma.
I think it really put a spotlight on some of the vulnerabilities that we have in our society in every facet of our existence. Work, education, social life, medical and healthcare infrastructure, transportation, commerce, you name it, it was disrupted in some way, shape, or form.
This spring, the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others sparked some of the most widespread protests in American history. Thousands poured into the streets, calling for police reform.
I think it's really important that when we look back now on 2020, we understand why there was so many protests in that particular year, so that going into 2021, we heed those many young people that were in the street.
We have to get to a point in America where we address the sickness of America, which is racism.
The messaging is always so essential to how we understand what's happening in the moment, how we understand our history. Initially, protests have a lot of public support, but very, very quickly, media and certainly politicians begin to start a narrative of, oh my goodness, but they're just so violent. Why is there so much violence? So when we look at 2020, the vast majority of the protests were nonviolent. They were orderly. They were extremely peaceful.
The protests continued throughout the summer, and tensions grew deadly in Kenosha, Wisconsin, when Kyle Rittenhouse allegedly killed 2 people, his lawyer later claiming it was self-defense.
This morning, President Trump is back at the White House, released from the hospital, discharged by doctors at Walter Reed Medical Center.
President Trump now declaring himself free of the coronavirus.
As the summer ended, the fall brought all eyes on President Trump and the race for the White House. In a year where both sides were declaring the race the most consequential election in our lifetimes, Joe Biden eventually won the presidency with 306 electoral votes.
The people of this nation have spoken. We've won with the most votes ever cast for a presidential ticket in the history of the nation.
Even as Joe Biden was declared president-elect, accusations of fraud and stolen elections continued for weeks, fueling an already divided country.
It's going to be a very hard thing to concede because we know there was massive fraud.
How do we walk back the enormous damage that was done to our public discourse, our faith in our institutions, our faith in our democracy? And frankly, how do we walk back our faith in each other, our belief that human beings actually have value? That moment is unclear.
Here's where leadership matters. If you're in an explosive situation, leadership can either defuse that or light the flame. We don't have to go down the road to greater conflict and upheaval. We only go in that direction if we keep fighting each other. It's not going to be easy to get us back to being a strong, united country that agrees that all of us share the same values.
You know, this was the quintessential wake-up call for our healthcare infrastructure. How we look at our hospital system, how we look at the rest of our cities and rural areas in terms of their ability to respond to a medical crisis of this magnitude, I think will be changed forever. Hopefully people will look at 2021 and realize how strong they are, how resilient the human spirit and body and society is. And even though it may have felt like we wouldn't get through this or couldn't get through it, we have, we are, and we will.